In March 2013, the lifeless body of 29-year-old Vanessa Reed was found in her Arlington apartment, the result of a violent confrontation that left investigators unraveling a deadly web of deceit. The story uncovered Vanessa's shocking manipulation and her affair with FBI agent Daniel Harper. Beginning in the August 2012, at the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., Vanessa's calculated actions would set in motion a chain of events that would end in tragedy. March 6, 2013. In a luxurious downtown apartment, the body of a man is found riddled with bullets. The victim's identity, Paul Larkin. The murder scene is bizarrely meticulous, leaving authorities stunned. Questions arise. Who killed him, and why? The connection to FBI agent Daniel Harper becomes clear when surveillance footage reveals a confrontation between the 2 days before the murder. The case threatens to unravel secrets the Bureau would rather bury. January 2013. Vanessa Reed had been working in the FBI's Washington, D.C. headquarters for 6 months when she set her sights on Daniel Harper. Daniel was a decorated agent, respected by colleagues, and admired for his calm demeanor in high-stress situations. To most, he was a rock of integrity, the kind of person others leaned on in moments of crisis. But Vanessa saw something different. Beneath his stoic professionalism, she noticed a hint of vulnerability, a crack in the armor that she was determined to exploit. Vanessa had always been ambitious. From a young age, she believed power was the ultimate currency. She came from a modest background, the daughter of a single mother who worked tirelessly as a nurse in rural Georgia. Watching her mother struggle to make ends meet had left a deep impression on Vanessa. She vowed never to live a life of hardship and did everything in her power to climb the social and professional ladder. Her beauty and intelligence became her tools, and she used them expertly to open doors that might have otherwise remained shut. When Vanessa joined the FBI as a secretary, she quickly gained a reputation for her efficiency and charm. She was always impeccably dressed, her appearance flawless, and she had a knack for making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. But Vanessa wasn't just about winning people over. She had a calculating mind, constantly assessing situations and people to see how they could be of use to her. Daniel, on the other hand, was in a different stage of life. At the 42 years old, he was a family man with a demanding career. He had met his wife, Laura, in college. She was everything he admired, intelligent, kind, and grounded. They had built a life together, raising 2 teenage daughters in the suburbs of D.C. Laura worked as a high school counselor and was deeply invested in helping troubled students. She had a quiet strength about her, the kind that made people feel safe. But recently, Laura had noticed a change in Daniel. He seemed distant, his usual warmth replaced by a cold detachment. She chalked it up to the pressures of his job and gave him space, never suspecting what was truly going on. By January 2013, Vanessa had managed to position herself as indispensable to Daniel. She took on more responsibilities than her role required, often staying late to assist with tasks that weren't hers to handle. It was during these late evenings that their relationship began to shift. Vanessa would lean over his desk, her proximity impossible to ignore, or casually drop compliments that felt more personal than professional. Daniel, despite his best efforts, found himself drawn to her. It wasn't just her looks. It was the way she seemed to understand him, the way she made him feel seen, in a way he hadn't felt in years. Daniel had always been a man of discipline. His career required it. As an FBI agent, he dealt with cases that demanded precision and focus, but in Vanessa's presence, his control wavered. At first he told himself it was harmless, a bit of attention from a younger woman, nothing more. But as the weeks went on, he found excuses to spend more time in her company. Late nights turned into private conversations, and those conversations turned into something more. Vanessa, for her part, knew exactly what she was doing. She had studied Daniel, learning his habits and weaknesses. She knew about his family, his dedication to his job, and the weight he carried as a provider and protector. She used this knowledge to her advantage, presenting herself as someone who understood the pressures he faced. But her motives were far from pure. Vanessa saw Daniel as a means to an end, a way to gain access to power and influence within the Bureau. By early February 2013, the dynamic between them had shifted entirely. Vanessa began to push boundaries, using their relationship to access information she wasn't authorized to see. She would casually ask about cases during their conversations, framing her curiosity as an innocent interest in his work. Daniel, blinded by guilt and desire, shared more than he should have. It started with small details, things he thought were harmless, but soon Vanessa was asking for more. The turning point came in mid-February. Vanessa asked Daniel to intervene in a case involving an international arms dealer. The man had connections to powerful figures, and Vanessa wanted the evidence against him suppressed. She claimed it was for the greater good, but Daniel knew better. When he refused, Vanessa's demeanor changed. Her warmth turned to ice, and she began to threaten him subtly, reminding him of what was at stake. She hinted at exposing their affair, knowing it would ruin his career and devastate his family. Daniel was trapped. The guilt of his actions weighed heavily on him, and the fear of losing everything he had built was paralyzing. He confided in his closest friend, Agent Rick Simmons, a fellow FBI agent he had worked with for over a decade. Rick was blunt in his advice. Daniel needed to end the relationship immediately and come clean to his superiors. But Daniel couldn't bring himself to do it. He feared Vanessa's wrath, knowing she wouldn't go down quietly. By the end of February 2013, the tension between them had reached a breaking point. Vanessa began to openly manipulate Daniel, using her knowledge of his vulnerabilities to control him. She would show up unannounced at his home, leaving subtle traces of her presence that could easily be discovered by Laura. She hinted at knowing personal details about his daughters, a veiled threat that sent chills down Daniel's spine. Daniel was a man trained to handle danger, but in Vanessa, he faced a threat unlike any he had encountered. She wasn't a criminal to be apprehended or a case to be solved. She was a force that threatened to unravel his entire life. As March 2013 approached, Daniel realized that his affair had spiraled into something far darker than he ever anticipated. He knew he had to act, but the question was whether he could do so before Vanessa's schemes destroyed him completely. By February 28, 2013, Vanessa Reed's frustrations had reached a breaking point. Over the previous weeks, her attempts to manipulate Daniel Harper had met resistance. What had once been a thrilling power dynamic was now a bitter standoff. Daniel, though initially swayed by her charm and threats, had begun to reassert control. He refused to yield to her latest demand, suppressing a case involving a dangerous arms dealer. For Vanessa, this wasn't just a rejection. It was an insult that cut deeply into her pride and ambitions. Vanessa's rage simmered just beneath her polished exterior. She had always believed she could control people, bend them to her will, but Daniel's defiance was a stark reminder of her limitations. As she sat alone in her apartment that evening, her thoughts spiraled. The affair that had once felt exhilarating now seemed like a trap she couldn't escape. She had invested too much, risked too much, and now Daniel was slipping from her grasp. Fueled by desperation and anger, Vanessa made a fateful decision. She reached out to Paul Larkin, a man she had met during her years of climbing the social ladder. Paul was not a stranger to violence. Known in underground circles as a reliable problem solver, his reputation was built on precision and discretion. For Vanessa, he was the perfect tool to eliminate the problem Daniel represented. Vanessa's communication with Paul was careful. She framed her request as a business transaction, concealing her personal motives. She described Daniel as a threat to her safety, painting him as an unstable man who had turned violent. Paul, motivated by the promise of a significant payout, agreed to take the job. To Vanessa, it felt like reclaiming power. She was taking control of a situation that had spiraled beyond her grasp. But Vanessa underestimated Daniel. While she plotted against him, Daniel was piecing together her intentions. He had spent years studying patterns of behavior, unraveling plots before they could unfold. Something in Vanessa's recent behavior, the way she avoided his gaze, her sudden silences, and her subtle hints about knowing dangerous people, alerted him to a deeper threat. Using his training, Daniel began monitoring Vanessa's communications. He stayed late at the FBI office, accessing secure systems to trace phone calls and emails she thought were untraceable. It didn't take long for him to discover her connection to Paul Larkin. The details of their arrangement were chilling. Vanessa had provided Paul with a schedule of Daniel's movements, ensuring that he would be caught off guard. Daniel's discovery shook him to his core. Vanessa's betrayal felt like a dagger to the heart, not just because of the danger it posed, but because it marked the complete unraveling of whatever connection they once shared. He had seen her as more than a manipulative force. Part of him had believed there was a vulnerable, broken person beneath her cunning facade. Now, he realized she would stop at nothing to protect herself, even if it meant destroying him. Daniel knew he had to act swiftly. He couldn't risk involving the FBI. Exposing Vanessa's schemes would inevitably bring his own mistakes to light, jeopardizing his career and his family. He decided to handle the threat alone. By March 4th, 2013, Daniel had set his plan in motion. He deliberately leaked false information about his whereabouts, ensuring it would reach Paul. The location was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., a place Daniel had chosen for its isolation. It was a calculated risk, a controlled environment where he could face his pursuer on his own terms. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel arrived at the warehouse. The air was cold, the kind of sharp chill that seemed to amplify every sound. Inside, the vast, empty space was dimly lit by the flickering glow of a single overhead bulb. Daniel positioned himself strategically, using the shadows to his advantage. His senses were heightened, every nerve on edge as he waited. Paul Larkin arrived shortly after, his footsteps echoing against the concrete floor. He moved with the confidence of someone who had done this before, his hand resting on the concealed weapon at his side. Paul's presence was imposing, his movements deliberate and calculated. He scanned the room, searching for his target. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Paul was a professional, but Daniel's training gave him the upper hand. He had anticipated every move, using the element of surprise to disarm Paul. The struggle was intense, a clash of strength and strategy. Paul fought with the ferocity of a man who had everything to lose, but Daniel's resolve was unshakable. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a battle to reclaim his life from the chaos Vanessa had unleashed. In the end, Daniel emerged victorious. Paul lay motionless on the cold, concrete floor, his weapon clattering away in the final moments of the struggle. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Daniel's ragged breaths. He stood over Paul's lifeless body, the weight of what had just happened settling over him like a shroud. The aftermath was a blur. Daniel worked quickly, removing any traces that could link him to the scene. He knew the FBI's protocols intimately and used that knowledge to cover his tracks. As he drove away from the warehouse, his mind raced. The encounter had left him shaken, but it also solidified his resolve. Vanessa had crossed a line, and now she had to be stopped. Daniel returned home late that night, his hands trembling as he unlocked the front door. His wife Laura was already asleep, unaware of the danger that had come so close to tearing their family apart. Standing in the quiet darkness of his living room, Daniel realized just how much he stood to lose. Vanessa's betrayal had set a chain of events into motion that couldn't be undone, but he was determined to end it before it consumed him entirely. By March 5th, 2013, the tension between Daniel Harper and Vanessa Reed had reached its breaking point. Vanessa, unaware of Paul Larkin's death the day before, went about her day with the same confidence that had carried her through her manipulative schemes. She attended work at the FBI, her demeanor calm and composed, giving no indication of the chaos brewing beneath the surface. To her colleagues, she appeared as the efficient and unflappable secretary they all knew. But Daniel saw something else, a dangerous threat that needed to be neutralized. Daniel, however, was operating under a newfound clarity. The confrontation with Paul had solidified his resolve. He had survived an attempt on his life and knew that Vanessa wouldn't stop until she regained control. Her obsession, her threats, and now her willingness to resort to murder made it clear. This was no longer just about protecting his career or his family. It was about survival. Daniel orchestrated a plan. He reached out to Vanessa that day, feigning an olive branch. He suggested a meeting at her apartment that evening, under the guise of finding a resolution to their ongoing conflict. Vanessa, ever the strategist, agreed, seeing the meeting as an opportunity to reassert her power over him. She believed Daniel was on the defensive, unaware of how much the balance of power had shifted. That evening, Daniel arrived at Vanessa's upscale apartment in Arlington, Virginia. The building was quiet, the dim hallway, lights casting long shadows as he walked to her door. He had been there before, during the height of their affair, but tonight the space felt foreign and hostile. The air was thick with tension as Vanessa let him in, her expression a calculated mix of suspicion and charm. The apartment, meticulously decorated with sleek furniture and expensive art, reflected Vanessa's carefully constructed image of control and success. But there were cracks in the facade, small signs of her unraveling. A half-empty glass of wine sat on the counter, and the living room was cluttered with papers and clothes, a stark contrast to her usual precision. Vanessa's confidence masked a growing desperation, one that Daniel could sense as he stepped inside. The conversation began with measured tones. Vanessa spoke with her usual charisma, attempting to manipulate the situation. She framed herself as the victim, subtly reminding Daniel of the secrets she held, the leverage she could use. But as the minutes passed, her composure began to fray. Daniel's demeanor was different, calm, resolute, and unyielding. He wasn't the man she had controlled for months, and that realization seemed to unsettle her. As the tension escalated, Vanessa's desperation took over. She lashed out verbally, accusing Daniel of betrayal, of ruining her life. Her words were laced with anger and fear, revealing just how deeply she had spiraled. When it became clear that Daniel wasn't swayed by her usual tactics, Vanessa snapped. In a moment of blind fury, she grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter and lunged at him. The attack was sudden and ferocious, but Daniel was prepared. His training as an FBI agent kicked in, and he acted instinctively to defend himself. The struggle was brief, but intense. Vanessa fought with the ferocity of someone who felt she had nothing left to lose, but Daniel's experience and composure gave him the upper hand. In the chaos, he managed to disarm her, and, in a split-second decision, he drew his firearm. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the apartment, followed by an eerie silence. Vanessa collapsed to the floor, her lifeless body sprawled on the polished hardwood. The knife clattered beside her, a chilling reminder of how quickly the confrontation had turned deadly. Daniel stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. The weight of what had just happened settled over him like a heavy fog. He hadn't intended for things to end this way, but he knew there had been no other choice. Vanessa's obsession, her schemes, and now her attempt to kill him, had left him with no alternative. By the early hours of March 6, 2013, the FBI had been alerted to the situation. Daniel, knowing the Bureau's protocols and the potential fallout of the incident, contacted his superior immediately after the shooting. His call set into motion a carefully orchestrated cover-up, one designed to protect not just Daniel, but the reputation of the agency itself. Senior officials within the FBI convened in a closed-door meeting. They reviewed the details of the case, the affair, Vanessa's manipulation, her connection to Paul Larkin, and her final violent act. The decision was unanimous. The truth could not come to light. The Bureau's integrity and the security of ongoing operations were at stake. Vanessa's death was reclassified under a fabricated narrative. She was labeled a foreign agent who had infiltrated the FBI to access classified information. The Bureau claimed that Daniel, in the line of duty, had uncovered her espionage activities, and acted to neutralize the threat. The knife she had wielded became evidence of her aggression, and the story was tailored to portray Daniel as a hero who had saved the agency from a grave danger. The apartment was swept clean of any incriminating evidence. Vanessa's personal effects were meticulously examined, and any trace of her relationship with Daniel was erased. Her connection to Paul Larkin was used to bolster the narrative, framing her as a cunning operative working for an unknown foreign power. By the time the story broke in the media, it was a polished account of national security triumph. Vanessa Reed, once an ambitious secretary with grand plans, was now a nameless figure in a fabricated tale of espionage and betrayal. Daniel was reassigned to a low-profile role, shielded from public scrutiny, but forever haunted by the events of those 2 days. As the dust settled, the Bureau moved on, its reputation intact. But for Daniel, the cost was immeasurable. He returned home that night, his mind replaying the events in agonizing detail. The weight of Vanessa's death and the lies that followed hung over high. By March 7, 2013, the official story of Vanessa Reed's death had already begun circulating through both internal FBI channels and the media. Vanessa was painted as a covert foreign agent who had infiltrated the Bureau, her death framed as a necessary act to protect national security. Publicly, she became a faceless villain in a sanitized narrative. However, within the FBI, the story sparked whispers that refused to die. Vanessa's colleagues, who had known her as an ambitious and capable secretary, found it difficult to reconcile the woman they worked with and the operative described in the press. Questions about her motivations and the true extent of her actions began to swirl. Agents speculated whether her betrayal was part of a larger network or if she had acted alone. The silence from FBI leadership only deepened the intrigue. For many, it felt like there was more to the story, layers that remained concealed. Daniel Harper, now reassigned to a less visible position within the Bureau, felt the weight of these unspoken doubts daily. Officially, he was lauded as the agent who had neutralized a significant threat, but privately, he was a man in turmoil. His reputation within the Bureau had shifted. Some saw him as a hero, while others whispered about his proximity to Vanessa, questioning whether his involvement was as clean as the official narrative suggested. At home, Daniel's life was equally strained. Laura Harper, his wife, had noticed a profound change in him since the events of early March. Daniel was always reserved, but now he seemed distant in a way she couldn't penetrate. He was quieter during family dinners, often lost in thought, and the warmth that once defined their relationship felt replaced by an impenetrable wall. Laura didn't press him for details about what had happened. Years of being married to an FBI agent had taught her to respect the boundaries of his work, but she couldn't ignore the growing distance between them. Laura also grappled with her own doubts. The media coverage of Vanessa Reed's death had planted seeds of suspicion she didn't want to acknowledge. The mention of Vanessa's name in connection with Daniel sent chills through her, but she pushed the thoughts aside, choosing to focus on rebuilding their life together. Still, the trust between them was fragile. A tenuous thread stretched thinner with each passing day. For Daniel, the guilt was overwhelming. Every time he looked at Laura or their teenage daughters, he was reminded of how close he had come to losing everything. The affair with Vanessa, her betrayal, and the events leading to her death were like a shadow that followed him everywhere. At work, he avoided eye contact with colleagues who might ask questions he couldn't answer. At home, he struggled to reconnect with his family, his attempts often feeling hollow and forced. The whispers within the FBI continued to grow. Vanessa's actions raised uncomfortable questions about the Bureau's internal security protocols. If someone like Vanessa could infiltrate their ranks and operate undetected, who else might be hiding in plain sight? The leadership's decision to classify the case as closed left many feeling uneasy. Some agents quietly began revisiting old cases, looking for patterns or connections that might link back to Vanessa. There was a pervasive sense of paranoia, a fear that the danger she posed hadn't ended with her death. By the April 2013, Daniel's life had settled into a fragile routine. He worked quietly in his new role, avoiding the spotlight and focusing on smaller, less sensitive cases. At home, he made a concerted effort to be present for his family, though the emotional distance lingered. Laura began to sense that Daniel was trying to atone for something, though she didn't know what. He would bring home flowers unexpectedly, or plan family outings, gestures that felt more like apologies than acts of affection. Then, one evening, as Daniel was reviewing case files in his home office, something happened that shattered his fragile sense of normalcy. His computer screen flickered, and an encrypted message appeared in his inbox. The subject line was blank, and the sender was anonymous. The message itself was short, but chilling. It contained only a single sentence: "The web is not undone." Daniel's heart raced as he stared at the screen. The phrase was cryptic, but its implications were clear. It was a warning. Vanessa's reach extended beyond the grave, and whatever network she was part of was still active. The message felt like a taunt, a reminder that the story he thought had ended was far from over. In the days that followed, Daniel became increasingly paranoid. He began reviewing Vanessa's case files with a new intensity, searching for clues he might have missed. He contacted trusted colleagues discreetly, asking pointed questions about recent anomalies in their investigations. His late nights became consumed with piecing together fragments of information, each discovery leading to more questions than answers. Meanwhile, Laura watched Daniel's behavior with growing concern. She knew something was wrong but didn't know how to reach him. The distance between them felt insurmountable, and for the first time in their marriage, Laura wondered if she truly knew the man she had built her life with. By May 2013, the paranoia within the Bureau had reached a fever pitch. The whispers about Vanessa had grown louder, and Daniel's colleagues began to notice his increasing obsession with her case. Some questioned whether he was driven by guilt or if he knew more than he was letting on. Others quietly supported him, believing that his instincts were leading him towards something significant. The encrypted message remained a mystery, but it was a reminder to Daniel that the danger was far from over. The threads Vanessa had spun during her time at the Bureau were still entangling lives, and the question lingered. Was she just a pawn in a larger game, or had she been the mastermind all along? As Daniel sat in his office late one night, the sound of his family sleeping in the background, He stared at his computer screen, the encrypted message still haunting him. He knew the answers wouldn't come easily, but he also knew he couldn't walk away. The stakes were too high, and the cost of ignoring the warning was unimaginable. What secrets had Vanessa taken to her grave? Who was behind the encrypted message? And most importantly, how far did the web truly extend? Daniel was determined to find out, but as he delved deeper, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The story was far from over. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss our updates. And if you found this story captivating, you'll want to check out the case where a Secret Service agent's hidden affair with secretary ends in murder. It's a case filled with betrayal, obsession, and a shocking twist. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.